Good morning, ladies and gents. Today is Friday. Woo! Right? It is Friday. Part of me wants to double check that now that I've said it because I don't want to get my own hopes up just to find out that it's actually like Thursday. No, it's Friday. Woo! Yeah! Cool. Glad to know it is. Glad to actually know, I suppose. So, we're going to pick up where we left off, and some of that is because we got pretty freaking involved in this this character creation script last time. And we are going to create a new script. This is going to be our character creation script. And we're just going to attach this sucker to the canvas that we've got. Oh boy. Character, yep, okay. How about now? Can I do it? There it is. So, because we've got a lot of stuff going on, we're starting to get to the point where we need to know some basic numbers, specifically minimums for each class. We need to know how many points we're going to give the player in total, and it's also good to know just how much in terms of power we want to be able to give a player. So do we want a linearly scaling system where 1 point in is 1 point up? Or do we want a system that kind of goes geometrically, where 1 point in is 1 up, and then the next point in is 2 up, and so on and so forth. So it's something we kind of want to keep in mind. It's always interesting to see how different systems tend to handle point-buy systems and things like that. Also, we want to make sure this UI is some of the most clean and reasonable stuff we've ever written, because if the UI isn't clear, and if we don't disable things at the right time and ensure that the user experience is good, we're going to have a little trouble getting them to actually trust us enough to play the game. So, let's see here. Character creation. First off, part of me is kind of tempted to literally just take all the stats, ball them up, and toss them in. Another part of me is actually tempted to take a player class. Let's see here. Or, sorry, a player character class. Fill it with information and toss the darn thing in. If only so that we can ensure that every time we add information to the player character class, that it is immediately available inside of this character creation class as well. Otherwise, say we add a new spell, or a new spell slot, we have to then go back over and make sure, okay, does the player have access to that? Okay, we changed one of the stats. We have to go to the character creation and change it. And we want to try and keep our maintenance to a minimum here, because otherwise we're going to spend the whole time, every time we make a change, we'll spend the better part of several hours maintaining the rest of the code to support that change. And we don't really want to do that. At the same time, if we look at all the different bits and pieces inside of here, actually, it doesn't look all that bad. I don't see anything, for the most part, that would cause us trouble. So I think for now, it might honestly be safe to continue using a player character as our literal storage mechanism here. It might be a little unhappy because it's going to say, oh, well, a character class needs to be attached to something. Right? If we look at what character subclass is from, it's subclasses from mono behavior. And that kind of means that, well, when you go to create a character, what we actually need to do, and I'll just call this character storage, what we actually need to do here is we need to make sure that all the stuff that's attached to it, none of it gets corrupted or set up in a weird way. So there is, let's see here, there's player character. I was wondering where that went. And we're just going to leave it completely flat slate blank. Excuse me, there should be nothing in here. I'm going to set this on thug instead of nothing, if only so that we have a default value here. Pretty much any place where I have a value, I want to make sure there's a default value in place. In most cases, 0 is fine. In fact, for skills, that's perfect. For inventory slots, that's wonderful. spell list of size 0 is fine. And we can even leave a lot of the references and portraits and things just straight up blank to handle it. In fact, I think this is a good spot right here, now that I think about it, to set the portrait for this character. So let's add that into our canvas. This is going to be a UI image. And if you hold shift, you get the square resizing as opposed to the, if you don't hold shift, it just lets you do the rectangle resizing. So that's always a neat trick to keep in mind. If you want something that's kind of a little more under control, that's the way you do it. Cool. And we'll need a next and previous button for the image. We'll probably keep it set to a certain default at all times. Actually, first off, let's set a background just so it doesn't look too ugly. And good morning, everyone, by the way. Yeah, Jalapenos Bud. Yeah, it's Friday. Woo! I'm happy that it's Friday. It's one of those, I could use a break Fridays. It's not the end of the world. Don't get me wrong. I love my job. I've been enjoying the heck out of it recently. Especially since I've finally, I think, gotten past a lot of the stuff that's been going wrong at the office in terms of having my servers be somewhat more scalable than they were previously. Yeah, that looks good. So that's pretty freaking awesome. There we go. There's our portrait. And let's just set it to one of the defaults for now, or to a default. Actually, should this not be a portrait? Should this actually be a different object altogether? Remove the image for a moment and go back to this. Should it be a raw image? Is that what I was missing? I feel like that's what is going wrong here. Although I could be completely and utterly incorrect. Granted, I'm also not seeing the images I thought I would be able to find fairly easily, so it's iffy. But I think I'm right. The character portraits should be in here somewhere. Actually, you know what? The easier way to check this, that I should have thought of initially, excuse me, is to check these guys, which, yes, they are marked as textures, not sprites. So we have to handle them this way. Also, something's going on with their native size, maybe? No, that looks fine, actually. Hey, Bunkin, Steam Boys. Afternoon. Where are you, Steam Boys? You must be, I'm thinking Europe, probably around, I don't know, you're probably somewhere around Sweden, maybe? If it's afternoon over there. Not entirely certain, but maybe. Don't quite know. Let's see, we need more buttons. Always more buttons. We need a next and a previous button is essentially what I'm hunting for. And just to try something crazy, that's a little bit much. Better. Okay. Yeah, I have left and right caret as buttons. I can do that. So there's our next. And obviously this is not final art, but it's a good placeholder. Curious what this looks like in, I like that a lot more. Okay. Okay, so we've got next and previous buttons. Sweet. You cannot tell me I actually guessed that correctly. Steamboy, if you're messing with me, you are messing with me, I swear. I don't know what I will do or say, but I will be surprised. Alright. Text is set up. We need to name our buttons. This is going to be the next portrait button, and we have the previous portrait button. I don't even know if I want the word button in the name, but yeah, for now, since the buttons will probably be the ones accessing the character class, I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so we now need pretty much every portrait to fall into our asset folder at some point soon. So what I'm going to do is toss down a folder called portraits. And I'm just going to grab the 4 portraits we have and dump them in for now. But eventually we're going to want to dump more and more in there. I'm just kind of looking at all the stuff in the folder. I do need to do a little more sorting to kind of match it all into the right place. Oh, your name is... Okay, I thought it was like Steam Boys We, not SWE on the end. Dang, I'm good. Yeah, guns. Anyway, an American thing, right? You make guns with your fingers and then you pop, 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 pop. You do it when you get things right. I don't know. It's like it's a celebration kind of thing. Woo! I got it right. Anyway, aside from going crazy, let's get all of this actually hooked up now. So the character creation, I'm kind of just amazed that I got that right still, because that was a guess. So here's our character reference. So the character creation has access to the innards of the character storage. That's a big thing that we need to take care of, because without access to it, we're either going to be searching every single time, or we're going to have to sit there and figure out a different storage mechanism, and I'm not really down for that. So we've got, okay, great, we've got character reference. We need to dump stats in here. We need to be able to dump information into here. And I also need a next button, probably. Now that I think about it, it probably would be nice to have a next button. So let's see if we can't get some of this stats stuff moved around. I'm just going to shift the number of points you have up, just so we have the room. Because honestly, I just need one more button. Maybe. We need a next button, and having a next button is very important to the whole being able to finish making a character once you've started. Also, the other thing we want to do here is we want there to be a basic FSM to handle each step along the way. So we can go, we'll start with your major stats. Once you've got those, we need to handle your skills and any other miscellaneous equipment stuff. And then finally what we want to do is attach all the spells that somebody may or may not want. Once we've got those things in place, then it's really just a matter of saving everything out to a file somehow. And that's going to be an interesting one, saving to file. We need to ensure that if something can go out, that it makes it into the file. And we're going to be using Unity's JSON library. We're going to try it out, because I haven't honestly messed with that much. And it's something that I feel like should be powerful enough to do what we need. But I haven't seen the API before, so we're going to be learning and working on that. And this may not be a great final form factor for all this information, but for now we can at least put the methods into place that we will be using to actually create the character that we want to control. Or creating the character we want to control. Yeah, there we go. Just making sure my English made sense. So, we need how many points are left? I don't tend to follow grid box sizers. I should. I honestly probably should. My biggest worry is that I'm going to change screen size and everything's going to go crazy. That said, I'm kind of in a hurry to work on some of this. Although, honestly, I should start playing with grid box sizers at the same time, because it's been quite some time since I've done anything of the sort with resizing, and I'm pretty sure that if I were to start the game right now, and then I proceed to, say, free aspect, and start messing with this, it doesn't play, or it doesn't care at all. You'll note that nothing changes when the screen size changes. If I start messing with this direction as well, same thing. Nothing cares. Yeah, so we do have to go in. Sir Crashed is correct. There is some effort that needs to be put into something as simple as just a couple resizers, so that if something changes, if something gets modified, that we can handle it correctly. Also, apparently using a character class is going to be unhappy, because the character class, or the player character specifically, has some kind of update UI method going on that's going to cause us a little trouble. So I think for right now, instead of using a player character class, I'm actually going to need to recreate a lot of the stats inside of it, as much as I don't want to. No, I'm happy to have critique. I mean, there are plenty of people who know more about game dev than me, and you are correct that it needs to handle, so it needs to handle resizing. We need to do a little bit of work on making sure that things line up. The thing is, I don't want to spend that much time on a UI that's not final. When I go through and do a final polish pass, that's when I will clean up all the things that might trigger some OCD from people. So for now, yes, things are going to be uneven, they're going to be ununiform, because I don't know that's how I want things to be in the end. I have very vague ideas for how I want things to look, and because those are very vague ideas, I want to make sure that I don't spend a ton of time on something that I'm just going to throw out later. So, we have our character information, and as much as I hate to do this, we actually don't need name. Name is one of the few things that we don't need a copy of. And Soups is right. Unity does have some kind of grid alignment and resizing. Most of it's used for resizing, honestly, but it does have the alignment stuff in there too. Let's see, character information. So what do we need then? We need race. Race is something fairly large that we need to make sure gets converted across. I'm not too worried about it though, because honestly, it's gonna be in here. Also, I can't help but notice that gender is what race has. Oh, I know what I meant to do here. The reason this is messed up is because that is the case. Because not every race has the same set of genders. Surprise, surprise. Alright, so what information do we need that we can't just hold in UI and just like preserve that way? Let's see. The portrait is definitely something we have to, well, actually no, the portrait's going to be sitting here. The points left needs to be defined. So let's go through those quickly. Resolve. Cool. Canvas scaler works pretty well for sizing if you're going to stick to fixed aspect ratios. That was kind of the plan, honestly. I don't really feel like doing anything too crazy about my resolution control, and so I was just going to stick with a canvas scaler to start. I don't know if I want to fight with that right now or on stream, but that is definitely something I do plan on looking into at some point, because I know that it can be a monster to get resolution control set up with our UI. So my two choices in that case either become create a UI at each resolution so that I can perfectly control it, but that also requires a lot of content and a lot of work. The other way to do it would be to attach something like a canvas scaler to it and just kind of hope that it does a good enough job that I don't have to do any cleanup after the fact. If that second option works, that's great, because I love automated ways of handling stuff. But if it doesn't work, there is a chance we might have to pick some really common resolutions and kind of go nuts with our UI. Although I really hope that isn't the case. I really hope that isn't. Okay, so we need to hold all of the stats. Great, we have the stats, we have the number of points left. So let's just start there. Because the other thing to keep in mind is we're going to need minimums. Once you pick a class, picking a class is going to define what your minimum and maximum details are. And we need two things. I'm actually going to make this private. And we're going to put total points in as a value that needs to get handled. And any second now. Oh, it says total points. I don't know what I'm thinking. So if we want to do this in a somewhat standard fashion, during character creation, I would like the player to be able to create a character who has probably, I'd say, a 4 or a 3 in every stat to start with. And that's pretty powerful. A 4 or a 3 is like what I want to be an average roll. All my die rolls are going to start at a pretty low number, so we're going to have to work our way up as characters. So if we want to put, let's say we want to put a 4 in every stat, so 9 stats, 36 points total. The character information I don't particularly care for at the moment. That's just holders for all of the stuff that we're going to take care of. When we start, we'll say points left is total points. We're going to also have a message that we have to receive that is on class change. And this is where we need some information that's sitting in my design doc again. So I have to take a moment to open that. Because that is where the details of this RPG system somewhat live. And we'll also have to handle things like bonuses. That's something we haven't really thought of yet, but the fact that certain classes get statistical bonuses, we have to keep in mind. Otherwise, this is going to get a little kooky. Let's see here. Once again, I'm just going to take a moment to do some crazy stuff with my my window format so that I can actually see chat and my design doc, because that is somewhat important that I can still see and talk with you guys. All right, drive stats, great. Character stats, great. What I really want and what I'm hunting for here it is, found it. All my class details, because classes have minimum stats attached with them. You have to have certain stats in order to be a certain class. So when you pick a certain class, what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to have to find a couple clean things to do. One is, if you pick a class and you don't have enough points left, I kind of want to reset the value of that class. Kind of, sort of. So, for example, how do I want to store this information? Because there's a lot of ways to do that. Okay. We're going to use some internal classes for things. So we're going to create a class called a stat block. And what we're going to do is we're going to dump all this information into the stat block. And then just say, by the way, you happen to have a public stat block. And the great thing is, if we go so far as to say, by the way, this is system.serializable, Unity should be able to dump the actual contents of the stat block into the editor for us to handle. Inconsistent accessibility, that's fine. We'll just remove the, oh, right, we want the public headers attached, or the public accessors attached to things. Let's see if this works. I think it will. There we go. So there's our stat block. Great. Now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna do two things. One, character class is, I believe, in the player character. Yeah. So there's our character class. Obviously, I can't use the word class inside code because using a word like that would then generate issues because, well, it doesn't know if it's keyword class or variable name class, or at least I don't want to do it because of that. It may not actually be entirely the case, but I don't care enough to really take care of all that. Let's see, this will be our, we have class minimums that we have to take care of. So I'm actually going to public stat block array with our class minimums. Yeah, okay. I don't know why every once in a while I feel the need to spell check a word that I clearly, I know I've typed right, but part of my brain says, that doesn't look right. Something feels off about it. And so I have to go back in and, okay, what did I do wrong? How many classes do I even have? That's something I need to, 15, 16 classes. Okay. Class minimums, how many? A decent number of them. Oh boy. Okay, so what we're going to do for each of these are all of our minimums. So we say thug, great. We now have a thug set of minimums where strength, I don't have coordination, but I do have endurance, and I have resolve as minimums here. Okay, after thug, we have guardsman, who is also somewhat strength-based, but less so. He's got a coordination and a resolve as well. Beggars, people who start as beggars, I should say. Endurance, resolve, and reasoning. Okay, so they are an endurance base and resolve and reasoning. And you'll notice that each of these kind of has a different archetype that I'm aiming for. So each time I create one of these, we're not trying to fill a gap or take care of like, oh, well, we don't have a strength class that has charisma as a secondary. There really aren't many of those. So we don't have that as a major archetype. Eventually, we'll probably end up adding more. But for now, I'd like to put the base 16 classes into place. And then when we take care of those 16 classes, we can then go in and say, okay, now that we've got that handled, what more can we add that would flesh out the world a little more? Or what do players want that we need? What are we missing, maybe? Because obviously, once we get all of this into place, it shouldn't be too difficult for us to just tack more in. Yep, base 16. Hat. Yeah, it's a programming thing. Powers of 2 are great, don't get me wrong. You are an endurance base with coordination and charisma. You are a coordination base, knowledge and charisma. And the reason I like doing all of this in data is that there's a couple reasons. One is that Unity is really freaking good at separating the two. So you've got the code on one side and you've got the data on the other. And putting things in the editor is kind of a good marriage of the two spots. You want to make sure that the data exists somewhere, but you don't want it sitting per se in your code. If I didn't have it in code here, honestly, I'd want to dump it into a JSON file somewhere and take care of it that way. Unity already has this fancy schmancy YAML parser, and it already does the serialization, so it's already taken care of for me, and I don't want to do any extra. I don't really want to do any extra work on that front. I do wish I'd put some of these stats in order. Because it seems silly that I am completely unable to take care of how these things are getting distributed. Carpenter. Okay, carpenter has become craftsman, and I can appreciate that change quite a bit. I do remember typing carpenter recently, but I don't see it in my code, so I'm just going to leave it be. Craftsman is also a knowledge base with strength and coordination. And endurance. Really? Huh. Man. Carpenter doesn't leave a lot of room for building. That's going to be most of your points. Also, all of these numbers are stupidly high. I need to go back and recut these so that they don't eat up all of your points the moment you pick a class. Especially something like Craftsman that has a lot of basic stuff attached to it. Initiate is a resolve base, so that's going to be his highest stat. Charisma and knowledge. After initiate is farmer, who has also a resolve base. Some strength. Okay, guys, 10 out of 16. We're almost done. Except that we need to go back and change these again. But I might actually end up doing that offline. I just want to get this running for now. The Tinker is mostly reasoning. With coordination and knowledge. I love the fact that the Tinker can use unidentified equipment. Just swing it around a few times. I don't know, you'll figure it out. Just don't blow us up. I can imagine him like using wands and spell scrolls and things that he has no clear idea how to actually use. But just kind of swing it around enough and holy shit, it worked. Or oh crap, it didn't and my party is, you know, everybody's poisoned or everybody's asleep now. Crud. Alright, bards are allure based. we've got that. Three to go. Harlots are also allure based. And some of these classes are definitely a little more, they lock you in a little tighter to what we expect. But that's kind of expected as well. You can't be a noble without a lot of charisma, a decent amount of knowledge and reasoning. So some of these we really want to take care of in terms of purchasing that class when you have it. We want to make sure that the player really wants to commit to having somebody of that class, and that they proceed to have the stats to make use of that class. Otherwise, you could have somebody who picks Con Artist who is, a terrible charisma, and suddenly that class's abilities are kind of going to be wasted. And this is partially a protection for those players who say, oh, I want to do this. And then suddenly, oh, well, you don't have enough points to do that, or you need to set this character up right, or it's not going to be terribly useful. So that's something I want to take care of kind of in advance. Make sure that the player is going so far as to set the right stats for their characters so they can't shoot themselves in the foot. Need a lot of endurance to craft them tables and chairs? Yeah, I mean, kind of. It's not just crafting tables and chairs. I assume craftsmen, if you're thinking blacksmith, if you're thinking wood turners, like folks like that, it requires a lot of endurance to handle some of that machinery for such a long period of time, working long nights, doing the kind of necessary grunt work to take care of stuff like that. Obviously, there are going to be some craftsmen who have it a little easier. Somebody who is a tailor is obviously not going to work so physically demanding a job as a blacksmith is. Meh. Cool. So, we've got all these stats sitting around. We need to start handling a way to add and remove from those stats. So when we start, not only do we set our points left, but we also need to, and I'm just gonna, yeah, why not? Because I don't wanna. We are going to transform Fine Child, and it is named Remaining. Get component. It is a text component. So finally, we start to fill in some of the UI. And something that we probably should handle is a UI update. That simply counts up all the points that are spent, and then also proceeds to count up how many points are left. And once it's done all its counting, we just update the UI with that number. Yeah, that seems like kind of the best way to handle this. Okay, so when we start, this number gets filled in, great. We now need a function for buttons to work with. And I'm going to go get my headers, my comment headers, so that I can actually there we go. Public functions, Unity functions. And of course our favorite, our helper functions. This is going to end up being our increment stat. I'm almost tempted to make one for each stat, but I know that's not going to be terribly helpful. I'd like to do this with as few stats as possible, or as few functions as possible, so we'll see what we can do here to kind of even this out. I don't think I have an enumeration for stats yet. It doesn't look like I do. So I'm kind of tempted to make one, if only so the buttons can use it. And what we just simply do is, we just strength, wow, strength. There we go. So we've got stats. So when we say increment or decrement stat, we now should be able, via the editor, to actually set this up correctly. Interesting. Twitch is telling me my stream configuration quality is incompatible. That's interesting. I need to fix that. As long as you guys can hear me, that's great, but just something I probably do need to fix. Grab every single button that we can. On click, we are going to go back to the creation canvas and tell it, hey, by the way, we are going to be incrementing a stat, which it looks like isn't actually in the list of things we can increment. That's unfortunate. Means we have to do something a little uglier. I'm not a huge fan of this, but it does. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it in the first place. I don't like hard coding values like this. Let's try it again though. Should allow us to now there's increment and decrement stat. Great. There we go. These all say increment stat. These, on click, should all do a decrement stat. You guys will have 0. You guys will say 1. Six, 7, and finally 8. Cool. Every time we increment and decrement stats, we want to update the UI. Pretty much any event is going to probably cause this. You can kind of see why I put this into a function and told it to do it that way. Handling it this way is, as I said, not the prettiest thing in the world, but how it needs to get done in this case. So let's see. So in pretty much every case, first off, you need points left. Otherwise, if you don't have any points left, we should probably skip the fact that you can add in decrement stats. At least for incrementing, right? You need points left to enable to increment stats. Anything else I actually don't know if I care about. Stat block dot strength. Here's our coordination. Switches are a great tool. I don't know why you make that face at it, because honestly, it's something worth considering when you write code. Think about this, the fact that a switch statement is easier for the compiler to optimize than a bunch of if-elses. Or a bunch of ifs and elses and elses. Granted, I have no idea what the Unity compiler looks like, but still, we want to handle this in the cleanest and best way possible, and for me, that means switch. I don't actually think I need these comments here. Knowledge. And why are you complaining? Oh, because I just put in the value. We have to put a modifier, otherwise it's just a statement that doesn't have any action attached to it. And that is not something we can have in code. There are two really good times to use switches. One of them is obviously when you need a single stat or a single variable to determine a bunch of possible outcomes. That's one good time for it. The other is if you need the fall-through mechanisms, which something like C# doesn't actually have access to. An array or list with indices would be better. Yeah, it would. It really would. The problem is I want this stat block stuff. Otherwise, it'll get a little crazy in terms of which stat. Yeah, I'm going to keep it this way. After allure is charisma. And finally, composure. And the reason I'm keeping with all the named variables as opposed to the possibility of having unnamed variables that sit inside a array is that if I go with the unnamed variables sitting in a list, when I go out to Unity to do the editor stuff, I really want to be able to see the names of each of the variables that I'm working with. Otherwise, making the minimums is going to be really difficult. I'm doing this more for a tools reason than anything else. And the big thing here is that what I want to do is take care of the fact that this needs to be readable by me so that I can handle some of the weird cases that might come up otherwise. I'm kind of going for developer time spent on a topic instead of doing the work to generate a better tool set, which I could do and might offline. We'll see. You guys might come back next time and see that this switch statement is gone. Because I don't like switches either, especially in this case, but I feel like it's a necessary evil right here, if only to so easily make some of this code run the way it does. In fact, I'm just going to dump this into a helper because I hate copy-paste code. we're just going to do this. And because this code exists once, it'll make life a lot easier for us. There we go. So now I can get rid of all this and just say modify stat -1. And this disappears and becomes modify stat 1. Cleaner, not the best, but cleaner. Alright guys, well I'm out of time. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm glad you guys were able to hop in, help me out. I definitely will try and figure out how to get this switch out of here, because I'm not a fan, but right now it's doing its job and it's doing it well, so I'm not going to dive in and clean it up without a good reason other than, oh, I don't like it. Because switches happen. It definitely, sometimes you need to do something like a switch or an if else. We'll figure out if we can do something better though. It might take a slight rejiggering of the data inside of the structure, but it's not the end of the world. Thank you again. Hopefully you guys have a great day, and we'll see about the weekend. I actually don't know. If you follow me on Twitter, you will get tweets a little bit before I go on to stream, and then you can catch me online there, or you can just hit that follow button. If it has a little green heart, you will see when I go online. And then you can catch me then. Maybe a little late, maybe not. Depends on how long my intro sits. Thanks a lot, guys. You've been great. I hope you all have a great day.